What if everything you were told about the hijab was a lie? What if this piece of cloth, often called a symbol of respect and modesty, was actually born from a dark history of stalking, jealousy, and a brutal class system that favored some women while leaving others exposed? Today, we're stripping away the modern excuses to reveal the raw, uncomfortable truth about the origin of the hijab as found in the most trusted Islamic sources. The story begins not with a divine decree for protection, but with a man's obsession with what happened when women went to use the toilet. In the early days of Islam in Medina, there were no private bathrooms. The wives of the Prophet Muhammad, like all other women, had to wait for the cover of night to go out to an open field called al-Manasi to answer the call of nature. But they weren't alone in the shadows. Umar ibn al-Khattab, one of Muhammad's closest companions, was constantly watching. Umar was obsessed with the idea that the Prophet's wives should be hidden from public view. He repeatedly begged Muhammad to veil his wives, but Muhammad ignored him. Umar, however, was not a man who took no for an answer. One night, he followed Sada bint al-Zama, one of Muhammad's wives, as she went out to relieve herself. Sada was a tall woman, easily recognizable even in the dark. As she sat in the field, Umar shouted out from the darkness, "O Sada, we have recognized you." He did this specifically so that a verse from Allah would be revealed to force women into veils. Imagine the humiliation of being stalked while you were most vulnerable, only to have your harasser's wishes turned into eternal law. This led to the revelation of the verse in Surah Al-Ahzab 33:59. Ya ayyuha an-nabiyyu Kul li azwajika wa banatika wa nisa'il mu'minin yudnina alayhina min jalabibihina. Dhalika adna an yurafna fala yudhaina wa kana Allahu ghafuran rahima. This means, O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to draw their cloaks close round them. In this way, it is more likely that they will be recognized as virtuous and not be harassed. But here is the hook that changes everything. Who was the one harassing them? It was Umar himself. The protection offered by the hijab was protection from the very men who were supposed to be the best of believers. But the story gets even more disturbing when we look at who was forbidden from wearing the hijab. If the hijab was truly about modesty and protecting women's bodies from the gaze of men, you would think it applied to all women. It didn't. In the Islamic State, the hijab was a tool of class discrimination. Islamic history tells us that Umar ibn al-Khattab would walk the streets of Medina, and if he saw a slave girl wearing a veil, he would beat her with his stick. In Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, it's recorded that Umar flogged a maidservant for covering herself, shouting, "Do not resemble free women." The message was clear. A slave woman's body was meant to be exposed and available for the public eye, while only the free elite were allowed the modesty of the veil. How can we call the hijab a symbol of womanhood when it was used as a badge of rank to humiliate the poor and the enslaved? The control didn't stop at clothing. Umar's influence over the Prophet's household and the lives of women was violent and direct. There's a famous story in Muwatta Malik where a man came to Umar because his wife had tried to stop him from being intimate with his slave girl by claiming she had suckled the slave, making them relatives. Umar's response was not of peace or mediation. He told the man, "Beat your wife and go to your slave girl again." He believed that kinship was only through suckling babies, and any woman who tried to use her own agency to manage her household deserved a beating. This culture of violence was backed by Muhammad himself, who is recorded in Sunan Abu Dawood, saying that a man will not be asked why he beat his wife. The hijab was just one part of a larger system designed to break a woman's spirit and make her a prisoner in her own home. You might wonder, was there ever a time when women were free before these laws? Look at Khadija, Muhammad's first wife. Long before the veil became a requirement, Khadija was a powerful, wealthy businesswoman who managed men and conducted trade in the open markets of Mecca. She didn't need a hijab to be respected. She was respected because the Meccan society of her time allowed her the freedom to be a leader. If Khadija had lived under the later laws of Medina, she would have been forced to stay at home or hide behind a screen, unable to look her employees in the eye. Islam didn't give her rights. The laws that followed her death took them away from the women who came after her. The most personal reason for the hijab came from Muhammad's own jealousy. According to al-Suyuti, A man named Talha once visited his cousin Aisha, who was Muhammad's youngest wife. They sat and talked as family members do. When Muhammad walked in, he was overcome with rage. He screamed at Talha to never speak to his wife again. After Talha left, he was so angry that he muttered that he would marry Aisha once Muhammad died. This sparked a divine reaction. Muhammad revealed Surah Al-Ahzab 33:53. وَإِذَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُنَّ مَتَاعًا فَاسْأَلُوهُنَّ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ. This means, O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to draw their cloaks close round them. In this way, it is more likely that they will be recognized as virtuous and not be harassed. But here is the hook that changes everything. Who was the one harassing them? It was Umar himself. The protection offered by the hijab was protection from the very men who were supposed to be the best of believers. The legacy of control has traveled through time to the present day, where the portable jail of the hijab continues to claim lives. The recent tragedy of Mahsa Amini, who was killed by the morality police because her hair was showing, is the direct result of these ancient laws. When women are told to stay quietly in their houses, as seen in Surah Al-Ahzab 33:33, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى, it is not for their benefit. It is to ensure that the madness of men like Umar and Muhammad remains the law of the land. The hijab was born from stalking, used to distinguish the elite from the slave, and perfected by jealousy. It is time we stop calling it a choice and start calling it what the history books show it to be, a tool of total domestic and social imprisonment.